Is Wonder Woman as much a triumph for women within the Hollywood industry, or is it just a much-needed victory for Warner Brothers and the DCEU universe? Welcome to the podcast show. I am Jerry J.J. Wayne Graham, and this is Talking with Burritos. On this episode, we're going to talk about Wonder Woman. With so much animosity over the validity of critics these days and the effect they have on a film's opening at the box office, one can indeed argue that a good word of mouth can and will influence how a film is received by, potential ticket buyers. Failures of the titles like Suicide Squad and Batman vs. Superman place the stigma on all future releases within this franchise, but is it fair to judge one movie based on the success of a franchise? As much bad rap as those films received, they have a good return on investment. Isn't that ultimately considered a success? Or is the critic's word really that important? Are sites like Rotten Tomatoes inadvertently controlling the industry by proxy? I found myself at odds with wanting to like this movie as much as everyone loved this movie. I mean, we got 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I should like it, right? That's the odd nature of criticism and human behavior. It's in our nature to not want to be at odds with the masses, to just accept whatever is popular instead of forming our own opinion or being truthful to our own selves. A movie gets a horrible rating and automatically it's cemented in your mind that said movie is a film you would rather not spend money to go and see. Access to such information so easily on your mobile phone, and whenever you try to go to Fandango, it shows up. It's really taking the risk out of watching movies. Whether you hate or love a movie, isn't it more about the experience of going to watch that movie and seeing it for that first time? Or is it that we would rather, just save money than take a chance on a film that may disappoint us? I was excited, by the idea that Wonder Woman would be the best movie of the summer, even better than Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 2. The last scene in Batman vs. Superman left me wanting more from the Amazon warrior, who faced off with Doomsday as Superman moped and Batman, hit alongside a building like some little scaredy cat bat. However, it just didn't rock my world, as it apparently shook up everyone else's core. All those positive reviews, and to me, the movie was just okay. Better than the status quo, but it was just okay. When I was asked, what do you think? Which is always my thing, I bit my tongue a little, I have to admit. Why? Because I believed my feelings towards this movie were maybe too subjective to really debate whether or not this iteration of Wonder Woman met my criteria as the Wonder Woman film I wanted to watch. Bree, a contributor to If 3 by Space and friend, shared the same sentiment. And finally, someone else who thought the movie was just meh. I'm usually very candid about my reactions towards a film, never really holding my tongue. I even waited to hear Bree's reaction before I could truly respond to her about whether I liked the movie. And to my surprise, she too did not share in the hoopla that is Wonder Woman praise mania. Instead of disseminating my negative thoughts onto people, I wanted to understand why it was or is that I did not share in the same agreement about this film. Wonder Woman isn't exactly an innovative film, especially within this overly saturated market of comic book inspired movies. Sure, it's the first movie helmed by a female director featuring a female comic book character as the lead to gross over $100 million. The accomplishment should be heralded as much as celebrated by other directors and actors in the industry, sure. However, we must not focus on the success of this film as a solitary achievement that will change the nature of film culture. The truth remains that this is just one film about a superhero that took 72 years to make, primarily because studios did not want to take the risk. Only after her appearance in Batman vs. Superman were they finally in agreement that, you know what, Wonder Woman can make us some money. I want to paint you a picture about Wonder Woman and how it sits within the industry right now. Wonder Woman is like a life preserver floating on top of an empty ocean. It doesn't fit within the current narrative which began with Superman and continued into Batman vs. Superman and should have gone on with the Justice League. Opposite of Marvel, they would have had to introduce the character after the debut of the ensemble team. Kind of like what they're doing with Black Panther. You know, he shows up in Civil War and now he has a standalone film. But with other characters like Iron Man and Thor, they already had their individual films before the ensemble team movie released onto the big screen. Wonder Woman is riding a wave of excitement, and it was a smart business move to make a standalone film now instead of when the excitement of the character coming off of Batman Superman subsides. I would have to say start with the praise that this is a home run for female artists in the industry. I'm sorry. You're giving credit where credit is due, but you don't want to make the payment. As of 2016, women comprised just 7% of all directors working on the top 250 domestic grossing films. Wonder Woman was poised to do well at the box office. Maybe not $100 million opening well, but Patty Jenkins would have eventually obtained this title of a person who made a movie for a studio that grossed a lot of money. Consider The Fate of the Furious as a perfect example. There was this brief celebration for F. Gary Gray becoming the first black billion-dollar director. Kudos goes out to him for the work he put in to make this film what it became, but his efforts weren't all that pushed this film to its incumbent success. The Furious franchise is 8 films deep and continues to perform no matter who is in the director's chair. Wonder Woman will eventually make $1 bazillion, but let's not focus solely on numbers. Rather, let's take the time and effort and let's take the time to commend the effort and vision of Patty Jenkins, who never directed an action movie in her life, and Gal Gadot, who has some big red boots to fill. They deserve more respect for their efforts than an entrance into the all-boys $100 million club. Much of what other people liked about the movie or continue to blab on about, I did not particularly find impressive enough to consider an indifference to mainstream movie fandom. As I tried to reason with myself about the supposed greatness of this film, I realized that it was all haberdashery, dressing up my opinion to appeal to the overall consensus. Wonder Woman wasn't that great of a movie. However, I was interested in why I do not hold the same opinions as others. I read a few reviews and talked to a few people who also watched the movie and pulled from those resources and conversations some good and bad aspects of the film that might help me form a different opinion of Wonder Woman on a second viewing. I am a firm believer that it takes more than just one watching of a film to fully appreciate a film, and I am willing to contradict my initial reaction towards a film based on further insight into why other people think it's important or like the movie so much. I'm an open book. Come on, not really. So here's Wonder Woman, the good, the bad, and some of the cheesy. Number 1, DC finally entered into the light of, I guess, happy storytelling? Yes, Wonder Woman had an endearing flirtatiousness with her naivete, fish out of water story beat. The scene on the boat with her and Trevor talking about sex was kind of funny until you listen to the dialogue and realize Trevor, the gentleman, is just really a horny dog man. I didn't necessarily need them to showcase their sexual attraction so openly. Diana had a mission, and her mission was to destroy Ares. This flirty schoolgirl guy routine was only a way to exploit Diana's innocence for a joke. There was this wardrobe changing scene that was funny and more along the joke spectrum I consider effective enough to represent Diana's diverse immersion into regular society. Using common stereotypes and customs that defined women during the 1930s and 40s, even today, was a fun way to show not only Diana's ignorance, but her strongly rooted Amazonian female roots, female empowerment, which we're going to go into number 2. Female empowerment. Godot handled herself quite impressively in the scenes where the omnipresence of men conflicted with her beliefs, and it was those vulnerable moments that identified with Diana's key character trait, empathy. But I really think they went a little light on the female empowerment, which would be why they focused a lot on the romance. Putting so much context of female empowerment within this film would have really served the story narrative positively. It would have maybe just convoluted things a little bit and made her more of a tool of propaganda rather than the comic book character superhero she really is. Number 3, Diana meets Steve. You know what's sexier than a sex scene? Not having a sex scene. I mean, come on. I know they just hinted at having a sex scene. However, it's there. You put it out there. They had sex. Or maybe they didn't. They had sex. Diana just met Trevor, and sure, in the heat of battle, things can get a little hot and heavy. Why does it have to end with her beckoning Trevor with a longing gaze as he closes the bedroom door? I would think any woman involved with this script would be like, what? No, ill. I guess when the director renounces cheesy as a word, then you get a scene like that. It's like when Kevin and Winnie had their first kiss. And yes, this is a Wonder Years analogy, but it applies to all romantic comedies where two people in love want to be together, but extenuating circumstances keep them apart. Example, Felicity and Scott Speedman, their characters on that show. We have Diane and Sam from Cheers, Buffy and Angel from those CW shows. With those examples, those couples had to endure many setbacks before they became a couple. The kiss between Winnie and Kevin only happens after Winnie disses him over and over again the entire first season. The longing builds up tension for the final moment or season-ending episode when Kevin finds Winnie in a clearing, sitting on a rock and gazing off into nowhere. Kevin drapes his jacket over Winnie's shoulder. Kevin drapes his jacket over Winnie's shoulder and holds her close with one arm. Slowly, she's drawn to him, and their lips meet for that first kiss as When a Man Loves a Woman plays over a soundtrack. Picture the final moment of Wonder Woman with such a longing looming over Diana and Steve. One kiss and boom, that's all the sex those two needed. Their relationship would transcend into something more, and that's love. That's a great scene. Here's looking at you, kid. It's not that the sex scene in Wonder Woman was cheesy. It just wasn't necessary. Number 4, the origin story. Some people, compliment them by including certain Wonder Woman-esque, the basics of Wonder Woman's story into here. But her story really stems from many different iterations from the 1940s. Let's go down. I got like a little checklist of a few. Diana is a princess. Check. They got that right. She was molded from clay. Check. Sounds stupid, but it is. It's true. Zeus is her father. Check. Trevor crashes onto the island of Themyscira. Check. But back then, it was Paradise Island. Diana fights in a disguise to win an opportunity to join Trevor on a mission to the U.S. Not checked. The queen, Hippolyta, she actually agrees to send someone, but she wants the best warrior to go. And so she holds a competition. Diana was restricted from competing. So what does she do? She just puts on a costume and she goes out there and she competes and she wins. The last one on my list is Diana loves Trevor. Check. She initially, in the first comics, she left Themyscira or Paradise Island because she was in love. Wonder Woman didn't come to save mankind. It was all lovey-dovey. She loves Steve, the first man that she ever saw in her life. He comes to the island, blah-zee-bee, blah-zee-bah. Romantic comedy ensues, mermaids. The hero thing came after, and of Wonder Woman came after, and the movie attempts to mold these two ideas together to sculpt an imperfect godlike figure who could easily destroy man and succumb to him just the same. George Perez created the Ares narrative in the first issue of the 1986 reboot of the series, in which Wonder Woman doesn't leave the island to chase after Steve, but she leaves to fight Ares. That's the context that they put this movie in. As with all comic book movies, they usually pick and choose which storylines work best for their project, and then find a way to tell a version of a story that appeals to the premise of selling tickets. Henceforth, why the plots of X-Men, Suicide Squad, Spider-Man 3 failed to work as fully developed story ideas. There were just too many people involved and too many storylines that they took from and mashed into one movie. Writers are usually asked to put too much into a 2-hour film. When doing so, they add or leave out very important or crucial parts of a storyline that spanned 10 to 20 issues. Instead of having Dark Phoenix and the mutant gene, how about we just have Dark Phoenix, which X-Men is supposed to do now? The fifth reason, good or bad or cheesy, goes to arguably the best scene in the movie, which I'm going to tell you, almost did not make it into the movie. Quote from Patty Jenkins, the director. Here it is. I'm reading it verbatim. It's my favorite scene in the movie, and it's the most important scene in the movie. It's also the scene that made the least sense to other people going in, which is why it's a wonderful victory for me. I think that in superhero movies, they fight other people. They fight villains. So when I started to really hunker in on the significance of No Man's Land, there were a couple people who were deeply confused, wondering well, what is she going to do? How many bullets can she fight? And I kept saying, it's not about that. This is a different scene than that. This is a scene about her, Diana, becoming Wonder Woman. I agree with every word that she spoke. When thinking subjectively about why something does or does not work, we tend to not take into consideration the art of creating a moment like this on film. It's not about how much sense it makes a lot of times. We all know there was no mystic Amazon warrior fighting battles in World War I. The No Man's Land scene was more about the atrocities of war and sanctimony of battle. Diana would conquer the unconquerable, a stretch of land littered with hundreds of dead soldiers for the morally good, and not just to kill an enemy. She wanted to do it to save people. This particular fight scene was bigger than even Ares himself, as in that moment, this No Man's Land scene, when she was just taking a barrage of bullets, standing in the midst of battle. That is the moment Diana wore her heart outside of her chest as a hero who would later, be labeled a wonder. That's my take on Wonder Woman. It was a good film. I don't think it was a great film. But yet, hearing the expressions or some of the reactions of women who actually watched this movie, and they were all positive. And that was a beautiful thing to see, because even sitting next to my daughter, who I think is sometimes my youngest daughter, who I think sometimes is a robot, and my wife, who is annoyingly cute in her ignorance, was just excited. She was like clapping and saying, hell yeah, during a lot of these scenes when you see Wonder Woman just busting everybody's chops and just doing her wondrous thing and being this badass superhero. And even my daughter was like, yay, off to the left of me. While my son and I were just looking at the screen, but I had already seen it. So, there was some things I chuckled at and even some things I marveled at the second time. So, my actual reaction did not change towards this movie. I still thought it was mediocre. However, I do respect what it is doing or what it has done, which is to put this character that has been sitting on the shelf for 70-something years, and put her out there finally. She's actually out there in the open for people to to idolize, to look after, to want to welcome again into this male-driven atmosphere. Would it be a feminist statement to say that? Not really, because this is, again, a comic book movie. But if you consider the nature of her origins, I would hope maybe on the next films they become a little bit more daring in expressing that. But I can understand why they wouldn't do it now. And I respect this movie for what it is and what it could become in the future. Can't wait to see her in... Okay, I can't say I can't wait to see her in Justice League, because it might be good and it might not. I'm still not sold on Justice League. I think it's just going to be a whole lot of everything going on. I would love to take the risk. So let's go on to my scoop du jour for this episode. One of the better stories about Wonder Woman stems from the origins of the comic book character and her creator, Dr. William H. Marston. Jill Lepore, the author of the book The Secret History of Wonder Woman, wrote an article for the Smithsonian which describes the scandalous beginnings of Wonder Woman and DC Comics. Marston was a jack of all trades, a psychologist, a scientist, a lawyer, a storyteller, who started his work with DC in 1941. As a move to help curtail the onslaught of criticism from the media and watchdog groups, Maxwell Charles Gaines, the creator of DC Comics, took to an idea from Marston to create a female character who, among the likes of Batman and Superman, would help to soften, the violence and sexual nature of the current pulp comic narrative. Little did James know, however, that Wonder Woman would prove to bring him more attention than he so desired. The debut of Diana from the mystic Amazonian paradise island was immediately met with overall disdain. The number one complaint: they did not like the way she was dressed. Too much skin. They shouted as they burned images of Wonder Woman clothed in nothing but a tight red top, underwear, a lasso, and boots. Burn the witch. Okay, it wasn't that dramatic, but isn't that the same type of anger expressed whenever a woman comes out as against or not a picture-perfect example of the status quo? Past the cover and onto page 1, clothing was just the tip of the iceberg. Images of bondage and not-so-subtle feminist messaging throughout the comic caused for a plea that the comic be removed from the shelves and restricted from children. Such vile content would warp the minds of the adolescents of 1940 whatever, and then cause them to commit horrible acts of debauchery in the future. Does that sound familiar? And luckily, having a psychologist as your creator, he could defend Wonder Woman in reality as she defended herself on the page, but it wasn't easy. So in this article, Lepore, she touches upon Marston and his relationship with his wife, Elizabeth Holloway, and their live-in love affair, Olive Byrne. Their love story had nothing to do with Wonder Woman per se. The trio were very quiet about their living situation. His sons from Olive Byrne didn't even know that he was their father until he was dead and gone. Did they realize that their father had 2 wives? They were so clever in disguising their relationship all those years that instead of wearing a ring, Olive Byrne wore 2 bracelets. Marsden, Byrne, and Holloway all had ties to the feminist suffrage movement, and when you consider this history, Wonder Woman, the character, her meaning takes different shape, as she may have been a character birthed from an idea but molded into a model of female empowerment that exemplifies struggle, strength, and overall empathy towards mankind. This is the person who would later become Wonder Woman. I believe until we actually see that on screen, will we actually see or experience who Wonder Woman truly is. Thinking about her, the release of this movie and everything that went on with the Alamo Drafthouse, where they set aside one screening of Wonder Woman for women, and they advertised it just for women. And we had to have jackasses come out of the woodworks saying that, oh, this is injustice, this is sexism. For every man who actually did that, you're a jackass, you're a punk, and you really need to look at your nutsacks and make sure you have some nuts there. If that exemplifies anything, just that we still have that in our climate, that we can't do something so special as to say, you know what, this is for all women. Because I tell you, I believe 50 Shades of Grey, when that movie first debuted, the first movie, they had pre-screenings that were advertised to just women, and no one said a damn thing. However, just because someone wants to drum up a little bit of attention to themselves, they have to go on Twitter. They have to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to protest. I'm going to go out here and do this, that, or the other thing. It's totally ridiculous. So do they necessarily need to address that in the future? No, but I would like to see it, because it would give this character a little bit more context. And it doesn't have to be hit you over the head, feminism. The character can be rooted in the essence of feminism, of a person who grew up on an island where they taught you really necessarily didn't need man. As a woman, as all, gives you all the strength in the world. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. So let's go into. I wanted to bring in. So this is the time right here. I set up this segment a long time ago when we would do separate episodes called This, That, and the Other. If you don't want to hear about Wonder Woman, if you already heard what you wanted to hear about Wonder Woman, then you can stop right here. You don't have to go any further. I won't shame you for it. But if you want to continue, I might say something funny later. But no, this is just This, That, and the Other. It's just news that I want to pass on to you that is not like the news that you're hearing every day that comes up in your feed. And nothing political, none of that crap, so whatever. But I wanted to actually tell you, too, if you watched Wonder Woman and you saw this Professor M trailer, it's very mysterious. I saw the trailer. I watched the trailer just because they say, "Oh, this trailer, if you saw it and you didn't know what it was." I'm like, "What? Why is it so obscure? What's so weird about it?" And so I watched it and I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's weird," because it shows you nothing. It just shows like a figure that's kind of just like 1940s Wonder Woman, and she turns gold, and you got this bright light and the silhouette of a guy and maybe a lady behind her. It's a very obscure trailer. It doesn't tell you much. But yet, if you think about that story I just told you about Professor William Marston, and the creator of Wonder Woman, that's what that story is. I think it stars Luke Evans. He's a part of that. And some other people, I can't remember their names. I would say go check out that trailer and maybe go and get that book. I think the book is like $2 on Amazon or something. Go ahead and go get that. I would put a link into this episode for that book. This, That, and the Other news. This is my news story for this week. Teens rescued after spending 3 days in the catacombs beneath France. What? Back in let's say the 1700s. This was so littered with bodies. They had built these underground tunnel systems for exporting goods, for moving things around, for storage. They had these catacombs, these catacombs built underneath the city. But as time going on, I think after the plague and all these different things happened to Europe, or plagued Europe, technically, they were overwhelmed with bodies. They couldn't just go bury them because they had like burial sites just overflowing with bodies. And so what did they do? They started burying bodies underneath. Along these catacombs, these long passageways, these tunnels underneath the city, they start just burying the bodies there. And so now, if you can go on tours, you can actually take a tour of the catacombs underneath France, and you can walk those things, but you're not getting the real thrill of it, because they do have a certain sect of people called cataphiles, cataphiles, who break in and tour these underground tunnels and passageways, for sport. Because to them, it's all about the experience, and that you will never experience France or life or anything unless you submerge yourself within the presence of the dead. They go down and they camp out, kind of just basking in the glory of the dead. Let's just call it like that. And apparently these 3 kids, 2 kids, they were 16 years old, teenagers, break in. And so they get lost for like 3 days. And now I'm telling you, if you've seen that movie, As Above, So Below, it was a found footage movie released back in 2016 about a couple of set of cataphiles who get lost in the maze. 3 days? No. I don't even think I would last an hour. But 3 days and these cats were down there. I don't know what they ate or anything like that. I don't know the specifics of the story because they didn't really give any. All you know is that, these kids got lost for 3 days and then they were finally found. And one of them isn't dead. So, because I would have, I'm just saying, I'm very, claustrophobic. And another thing, I am deathly afraid of ghosts. I'm not deathly afraid. I think I'm more curious than afraid of ghosts. So it would have been interesting. It would have been, very risque to go down there. But to be stuck at 16 years old as well, one of my friends would have to go find someone and bring them back to my body that is on the floor in the fetal position because I haven't moved in, let's see, 48 carried to 72 hours because I ain't going down there and I'm not going to be running around trying to find a way out. You know what's down there? Death. And you know what's always down there? Darkness. There's no light. So I would have been freaky, man. It would have been like a movie from Aliens, or it would have been like a scene from Aliens or something. Or, Prometheus, that dark scene when the guys are walking through those, or the hallways of the ship that they later figured out was a ship. And, there's creepy ass things running around. So, no, I would have died, period. So, that wouldn't have been fun. But I just wanted to pass that article on to you. This is something to think about and talk about and start a conversation. What would you do if you were in the catacombs? Would that be more adventurous if you were lost for 3 days? How would you handle yourself? How would you keep hope alive that you wouldn't die? Because what if no one knew that you were down there? What if you didn't tell any of your friends? Most likely they told their friends, and so after some investigation, they found them. But what if no one knew and you were just lost? Or you believe in the supernatural and someone kidnapped your ass? I don't know. You guys talk about it amongst yourself and or comment to me at talkingwithburritos.com/contact. I am Jerry JJ Wayne Graham, and that's a wrap, but not a burrito. This is Talking with Burritos, the podcast that feeds you a weekly dish of movie reviews, media entertainment news, and other content you can share, or use to start a conversation. I am Jerry JJ Wayne Graham, your host, and if you would like to know more or get more content from us, go to talkingwithburritos.com.